I think, so just a little bit of background. My name's Mara. I've been working in the staking space for almost 7 years. Having seen, the space evolve over the last couple of years, I think it's fair to say that we're starting to see some really meaningful, participation in the ecosystem. Every cycle, is sort of an innovation cycle that we start seeing across, distributed ownership, and the first cycles that we saw, as well as, the NFT market in the last, 2018, 2019. And so I think what's really interesting is we're starting to see major adoption, not just across the retail market, but actually enterprises and institutions starting to participate, moving into supporting things like, brand and media engagement through innovations like NFTs. We're starting to see, meaningful interest from traditional financial institutions thinking about custody, structured products, and other things. And so, I think we're on the verge of, really building to scale this technology for mainstream adoption. I think with staking, and this is actually something I just spoke about on stage, really, most participants think of staking as something that is, inherently an opportunity for them to, participate in, providing security effectively to the network that they're supporting. But in many ways, it's also inflationary protection. And so most participants that we work with, really think about staking as something that, primarily serves the purpose of, asset preservation. And so security is actually a really important, consideration. Today, the main risk that you have with participating in staking is actually slashing. And so slashing risk is, something that occurs when you have, double signing events or other malconfigurations that effectively result in some losses associated with, stake that is effectively on chain. And so the protection or the security around this, particular, risk vector is really, top of mind for a lot of players. When you think about how the market has evolved over the last couple of years, you've started seeing, staking as a service providers, for example, as well as liquid staking protocols that are starting to take security as, principal priority or a design objective, making sure that they have the right distribution or diversification set. When you think about, infrastructure distribution, regional distribution, client distribution, Ethereum has been designed in a really interesting way, for example, when you look at how the network has been configured. And so, the considerations of creating decentralization have actually been incorporated into its design. When you have a higher level of correlation, the associated risks are much larger. And so when you have a correlated failure, say, because a large amount of the network is using the same client, then the losses actually scale proportionally to that correlation. And so the network has been designed to ensure that the distribution and decentralization of certain components is done effectively. And so security in many ways is a question, and also design choice that becomes really important in that context. So I think there's probably layers to this question. I think in the first instance, decentralization and security are correlated. And so when we think about security, one of the first things we ask is, what is the most impactful way for us to reduce the risk of, slashing within the context of our users and our products? As I just discussed, within the context of Ethereum, actually, the risk of slashing or the risk of losses is higher when you have correlated designs and architectures. And so one of the things that we do is mandate that our node operators, within our protocol, distribute their stake across different clients, different cloud providers, different regions, and really ensuring that we have a diversified basis. And so when you ask me, how should users think about this, I don't really think the question is to think of this as a trade-off, as much as building the consciousness and the education that is required for people to be able to assess risk in a meaningful way. Today, we do not have, like you would kind of consider in the traditional markets, a consolidated understanding of risk or even performance for that matter. One of the things that we started doing, on our side, we've actually been working with a lot of different partners in the space to think about how to create the right methodologies, the right parameters, and the right metrics to measure performance and risk side by side so that people can make more informed decisions about the risk relative to the reward that different solutions inherently offer them. And we're hoping that we can leverage some of this work to build towards that standardization and that understanding in the market so that users can become more conscious and also more aware as well as having the right access to information as it relates to, considering security and risk trade-offs for different solutions. I think it's a super interesting question. So I think simplicity and complexity are in the eye of the beholder, right? When you think about the principal objective of a blockchain, right, or at least let's reflect on Ethereum as, a baseline that effectively is trying to establish a global settlement layer, you're always going to want to optimize for design choices that maximize security and the integrity of the network. And so the staking mechanisms that have been designed for Ethereum are really trying to maximize those vectors. And so when you think about, the staking flow today, you have things including activation queues and exit queues that are monitored and managed by something that we call a churn limit. And so there's an effective rate limiting on the amount of validators that can enter and exit the network at any given point in time. And that is actually a security-focused design. When you're a user, right, you might not care about that design. For you, what might be important is that you're able to, participate and exit the network, at your convenience. When today the reality is that most traditional staking flows, probably take a couple of days to support, you to exit a position on a stake position, and multiple weeks actually to even get activated. And so when we talk about simplicity, I think there's just an inherent question of the perspective that we're taking. I think issuing receipts effectively, what liquid staking does is basically proof that there is a stake position on the network, and it issues an on-chain receipt of that position that users can use, in otherwise, meaningful ways. And so in many ways, I think of this as a primitive that is built on top of, base blockchains for the purposes of facilitating simplicity, transactions, and capital efficiency. And I think we're going to see this space continue to evolve at a pretty rapid pace. And so when you think about the movement of stake in the last couple of months, you're starting to see a pretty notable trend of more and more of the market actually moving to liquid staking solutions because of the inherent simplicity, as well as the ease of using and exiting positions on staking positions for the market. Collusion risk is always higher when you have a smaller amount of parties that are at risk of colluding. What's really smart about the way that, Ethereum, for example, has been designed is the fact that, today we, in many ways, designs want to optimize for better distribution and decentralization of both operators and users in order to support the right security principles. And so I think in many ways, like we, as a project, but also me as an Ethereum supporter, really believe that it's important that we build the right technologies and the right on-ramps to support a very diversified set of participants. I think it's very important that we, have the right solution enablement to support solo stakers who might want to run nodes at home, that we support node operators that, are going to be held to certain standards and requirements when it comes to their security practices, and together sort of raise the bar for what we consider to be a safe and secure environment for people to support validation infrastructure on. And so I think in many ways that is sort of the point of the market coming together to really think about enabling those types of solutions and capabilities more broadly.